First off, let's start with the land acknowledgement. The town of Coburg respectfully acknowledges that we are located in the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations, which include Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Rama, Beausoleil, and Georgina Island First Nations. The town of Coburg respectfully acknowledges that the Williams Treaties First Nations have been stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters, and that today remain vigilant over their health and integrity for generations to come. We are all treaty people. Okay, first item on the agenda is to talk about the upcoming elections in February. So every year we ask for interested members of the club to put their names forward to be board members. If you are interested in being a board member, we do have a vacancy on the board right now. And if you are interested, you should put your name forward to the nominations committee. Nominations committee is headed up by Whitney, and she will take that with the other people of the committee and look at the nominations and move those names forward. The other ask here is if you would like to be on the nominations committee, you can help out that way. So if you don't want to be on the board, but you want to participate in a committee, you can be part of the nominations committee as well. So that goes through Whitney as well. It is that time of year again. We're at the end of September, and just a reminder that membership renewals are due by the end of the year. So if you haven't been thinking about it, please start thinking about it. If you are so inclined tonight, Chris can take a membership renewal after the meeting. At the back, you can register, you can renew online. If you go on the website, there's a membership page and you can pay online that way. You can pay at the next meeting. You can mail in a check. There's a bunch of different ways and they're all outlined on the website. So you can hopefully move that forward in the next little bit. You will be getting reminder emails if you haven't renewed from us. Don't take them personally, just, renew when you can. One of the things that our club does is we sponsor, every year we try to sponsor a youth to go to the Ontario Nature Youth Summit. And it's a large gathering of young people who are interested in nature. And once again, this year we sponsored a local high school student to go to the youth summit, which just took place about 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago. And we're waiting to hear back from them. Usually we ask them to give us some feedback after what their experience was and what they learned. And so we're going to get that information back. But that is something that your membership fees goes towards, is sponsoring these young people to go to these summits. So I don't know if you guys have heard us talk about big projects, and big is the Big Ideas Group, headed up by Jerry McKenna, who's at the back of the room. He's the chair of that committee, and again, you can always join the committee. The Big Ideas Group gathers ideas of projects that Willow Beach could undertake. And one of the projects that we decided to move forward this year was to go to the nature center by the lighthouse at Presqu'île. You might recognize the building in the photograph here, and apply stickers to the windows to prevent bird crashes. Many of you know that Presqu'île is an important migration flyway, and there's thousands of birds that pass through there, and they do occasionally collide with these windows that didn't have stickers on. So we spoke to the park. We asked them if we could sponsor this project and do the work ourselves. So yesterday, a group of us were busy out there at Presqu'île applying the little dots to the windows. So in the picture from left to right at the back, there's Jerry, there's Chris, Tom, me, Tish, and Jenny, and Frank is the photographer who escaped being in this photograph. So there were 7 of us there yesterday applying the dots. So next time you go to Presqu'île and you're walking around the lighthouse, you'll notice that the windows are now covered with little dots, hoping to protect as many bird lives as possible. Jerry? Sign there. Oh yeah, we have a sign. You can't see it in this picture, but we have a sign that says that Willow Beach has donated these dots. It's a way to raise awareness about our club, but also the purpose of these dots. And interestingly enough, when we were doing this, probably at least 10 people that were visiting the park came by and asked us what we were doing. And one gentleman that was talking to me for a little bit, I told him the name of the product, and he went online and he was going to order it for his windows and everything. So it sparked quite a bit of conversation. People were curious. People understood right away when we said what it was for. Some people had no clue. But in the space of a few hours, we educated a whole bunch of people about preventing bird crashes into windows. On to sightings. So Elizabeth Kellogg couldn't be here tonight, so I will cover the sightings today. So just a short list. These are a bunch of sightings that have come in to Elizabeth and to Roger, and they passed them along to me. And I reached out to a couple people for these. So Richard, maybe I can just call on you. Yours is the top line item, golden plover plus 8 other shorebirds. So you want to share anything?
Well, most of them are on Gull Island, which you have to wade out to, so that separates most of the birders. They don't, mind you, the water only just up to your knees, and it's not cold water, it's an easy wade. But Owen Point can be good, but a lot of people go to it, so during the day, the shorebirds tend to just go a little farther on the Gull Island. Sometimes you can walk right across with a tom below. But this year, there's not several places you have to wade. And there's a little island off Gull Island called Sebastopol. I know it's a Sevastopol because of the Russian connection, but it's Sebastopol Island, which is really just barely breaking the surface, string of pebbles and stuff. But it's a very safe place for the birds. And when you get out to Gull Island, what you don't see on Gull Island, it's all telescope work, but you can see everything well with your telescope. You look over onto the Sebastopol, and we had gold plover and black-bellied plover and semi-palmated plover, and then we had paired sandpipers and semi-palmated sandpipers and white-fronted sandpipers. And there was one running turnstone, one actual sandpiper, and I forget what the other one was. But there weren't a lot of birds. If you're there at the right, we were there just at the end of that 10-day period with no self-respecting bird in its right mind would stop on the shore of Lake Ontario. And you're flying along at night at Lake Ontario, and it's absolutely bright. There's hardly any wind. What wind there is favorable. It's flyover weather, so there weren't that many birds, but there was nice range of species. But there weren't. Sometimes you go to Presqu'île and you see 20 gold plover and 50 black-bellied plover, 10 this and 10 that. It was slim pickings, but lots of species, so it was fun. And if you go to Owen Point, take your probably rubber boots. It's just about be okay now. I don't risk it. I wear an old pair of shoes, socks, I roll on my handmates. That's what most people do. But if you're interested in shorebirds, this is the high point of the shorebird migration right now. And there's still species that haven't even come. All the juveniles come late after the adults go through. So there'll be good shorebirding for the next couple of weeks at Presqu'île.
Great, thank you, Richard. A red-necked phalarope was spotted at the Brighton Sewage Lagoon. I believe this bird was only seen one day by Sarah. A barnacle goose that was first reported by Tom Jackman way back in May, I guess it was. And we actually talked about it at the May meeting, is still around. It's been seen in a few places in and around Presqu'île, so it hung out this summer down here. We recently saw a whimbrel, Chris and I, we were walking on Dickinson Road, and there was a whimbrel flying around and landing in the field. And for those that don't know, the little bird in the corner logo there, that's the whimbrel. That's the history of the club there. A potential morning warbler, potentially a McGillivray warbler, was spotted by Matthew Toby on the Coburg West Pier. So Margaret brought this to my attention, and she said that they are trying to confirm what it is. Now, Margaret, do you have any news for us on what it is? Very cool. So that is potentially a first for Northumberland County, but to be determined. And Matthew was busy. He spotted a hooded warbler up at Garden Hill. So The next set of birds. Full disclosure on the photographs. Sometimes the photographs are of the bird that was sighted in the moment that it was sighted, and sometimes we don't have photographs of that bird, so we have gone to stock photography from our photographers within the club to cover these birds. So Elizabeth mentioned to me that when she was giving me the sightings update, she said, you know, the white crowned and the white-throated sparrows are back. And this is one of 2 times of the year when we see them. Spring when they're on the way north, or fall when they're on the way to south. So see them now and close your eyes, and a month from now you won't see them. So I just put these 2 photographs together. So for those that aren't familiar, you can see the difference. White crowned on the left, white throated on the right. So 2 sparrows, approximately the same size, approximately white and gray and brown, but you can see where the differences are and why one's called a crowned and one's called a throated. So this bird, a buff-breasted sandpiper, was seen at Owen Point by Gerard Phillips. This is not the bird that was sighted at the time. This is a photo from Chris's archives. This is a live photo. This Henslow sparrow was a very special sighting. This just a couple of weeks ago, actually. Jerry, Jenny, and Jacob were doing some work at the Wesleyville property, and they found this Henslow sparrow, which posed nicely for photographs and sat out in the open and blew their socks off because they had not noted one before on the property. And so this is a very uncommon sighting for many people. So Jacob McLaren took this photo. Jerry got some good photos as well. So this bird is well documented now.
In all fairness, we should say that Jacob found
Jacob
told Jerry,
Yeah.
which is significant this season too.
Yeah, 18-year-old Jacob with 18-year-old hearing and 18-year-old eyes found the bird. This is an orange-crowned warbler that I photographed at my house. I didn't actually know it was an orange-crowned warbler. I just knew it was warbler or vireo or something. And I got a picture of it, and Chris was looking at the pictures that I'd shared with a few people, and she goes, I think your first one's an orange-crowned warbler. It's like, really? I'd never noted one on my property before. So this was a first for my house. And this very bland, nondescript bird is an orange-crowned warbler. This is a whooping crane. So the whooping cranes are going to be heading south soon. You'll start to see a few fly over. I did see 4 up on County Road 24 2 weeks ago, I think it was. Sandhill cranes, yep. This is not one of the cranes I saw. But there were 4 cranes, and there were 2 cranes that nested near this area this summer. And I found the 2 cranes with 2 chicks this summer. And so I'm wondering if the 4 cranes that I saw is the same family unit with the 2 cranes grown up. So they may not have come from the north. They may just be moving around their own territory heading south soon. This is a sedge wren. So along Dickinson Road, which for those of you that don't know, it's a really good birding spot. Matthew Toby again spotted a sedge wren. Now this is not a live photo of the sedge wren that Matthew saw. This is an archive photo from Sherwood. He's a phenomenal photographer if you haven't seen his pictures before. This is a yellow-throated vireo. Had a couple of these this summer in the Northumberland County Forest. So this is a picture of them. You can see how cute they are and the bright yellow throat. And this is a yellow-headed blackbird. So recently, several people have reported seeing one at Presqu'île. Now, what they would have seen at this time of year is a bird that's not as bright as that. It would be more subdued colors. This is in breeding plumage from springtime. But this is what a yellow-headed blackbird looked like. The pictures that were taken of the bird and that was spotted were not good enough to put up on the screen. They were just a little bit blurry. And that's it for sightings that I have to report. So anything from the floor to be reported? Birds or otherwise? Yeah, Don?
Well, I haven't done this in some time. Wading over to Gull Island is a real treat. Just a reminder that starting tomorrow, the opportunities will be reduced because of the annual waterfowl hunt.
Right. Well, maybe it'll make you walk faster. Yeah, the waterfowl hunt starts at Presqu'île.
So dawn hunting starts tomorrow?
That's what I understand, the
You
20.
can still go over Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays.
Right.
They hunt Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday.
Saturday. Yeah, hunting's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. Yeah.
And the cormorant shoot, as you know, is legal.
Any other? Margaret?
I was listening to the next one, so just to encourage people to look at all that flexibility. Because they're passing through the garden, and I have a beautiful banks of purple salvia. Almost at the edge, just outside my. So I can see. It's very far. And that's- So. It has. Sadly, it actually was a very ruthless animal, which is relatively rare in this area. It's probably the second most common hummingbird seen in Ontario, but there's not very many of them. So I watched it for a long time at 6 o'clock. And then it came back when it was almost dark at 7, because it wasn't there today. But unless you look at something like that really closely, you might not realize that you've got quite a rare sighting. But I'm not actually going to send this one in unless the reappears, which would be very nice.
So for the benefits of those on Zoom, may not have heard Margaret, she is encouraging everyone to check out hummingbirds carefully as they go by, because she may have spotted a rufous hummingbird in her yard. Anyone else? Yep,
I
Vince?
was talking to a woman in Port Hope there. She lives in an apartment building, and there was a hawk up in a pine tree. And a cat behind the window, apartment. Hawk came down, killed itself, broke the window. Probably, you know, but I don't think that cat will ever come near that window.
Wow. That's awful. So Vince recounting a story of a woman in an apartment who had a cat sitting at the window, and there was a hawk at the tree, and the hawk saw the cat and decided to try to catch the cat, but the window got in the way. The hawk died against the window, and the window broke. So
We need some dogs.
they need some dogs.
Oh.
Need some dogs. Chris and I, on one of our walks, we found 3 porcupines together. The scenario we thought was happening was that there was one female being courted by 2 males. And porcupines talk, and they were communicating, and we saw 3 on the way into the forest, and when we came back that way, there were 2. So one of the suitors must have got turned away or something, but they make the funniest noise when they're kind of mewing at each other, but it was kind of cool to see. Anybody else? Great, thanks. I'm going to turn it over to Richard now. Richard Gerard.
Thank you. Thank you. Man, it seems like a long time since we've had a meeting. And we've had a lot of activities since our last meeting here. And I hope you've all had a fabulous summer. We started out in June after our meeting in May with the Wesleyville summer bird count. And many folks here participated in a lot of these events over the summer. And June 18th, then we had the Swift, the Chimney Swift Watch in Brighton. Now, unfortunately, some of these events I was not able to attend, so I'm not entirely sure how many people we had, but some of them were well attended, others were at small attendance. But butterfly outing at Seymour Conservation Area with Roger. Then we had Bugs and Blooms outing at Leslie Abrams' house near Codrington, and that was a fascinating morning. Leslie has a lot of bugs and flowers. On August the 21st, we had a scavenger hunt and nature walk in the Woodland Trails, and what a beautiful day that was. I missed the scavenger hunt, but I got there for the walk, and it was just fabulous. Nice to have a chat with people walking along the trails, and good fellowship. August 29th, we had the fall migration outing at Marina's house, and wow, there were warblers just dripping off the trees. It was a great morning. Sun was shining. It started a little cloudy, then the sun came out, and the birds came out, and they really put on a nice display for us. Shorebird outing on September the 8th at Presqu'île. I think we had one shorebird, but we had a lot of other species of birds. It was that weird kind of shorebirds. They weren't there. Then we had the urban tree walk on September the 15th at my house. We had 5 dedicated tree huggers, and we had a really nice walk. And spent lots of time talking about the difference in the leaves between maple trees and sycamore trees and plane trees, and looked at tulip trees and coffee trees. It was a really nice walk, and a nice visit afterwards over whatever we drank. Water, I guess it was. And coming up, we have in October, we'll have a hawk watch if the winds are favorable. So watch your emails in the morning. And we'll have a good day where the wind is in a favorable, coming from a favorable direction, and we'll get some hawks going overhead. There are some passing overhead from time to time. If you look up and see, there's many turkey vultures flying by these days. And this morning I noticed that there were hundreds of blue jays flying west as well. On October the 20th, we've got a Kirtland's warbler habitat visit in the Ganaraska Forest, and the forest has been revitalizing an area to try and attract Kirtland warblers. They need a very specific habitat. And so that should be very interesting, because at the moment, the main area of nesting is in central North Michigan. And so I think we're trying to expand those ranges. On October the 24th, we'll have a Weber Conservation Area walk, and that's going to do that in conjunction with NCC. And that will be a walk. It's a little rugged. So you'll need a walking stick. You'll have an opportunity to harvest seeds for grassland species if you want to participate in that. And so hopefully we'll have some great weather and enjoy the walk at Weber and see what they've been doing there with regard to grasslands rehabilitation. November the 10th, we'll have a waterfowl outing. Starting Coburg Harbor and going east to Presqu'île. And then November the 19th, we'll have the Wesleyville bird count, winter count. So anybody who would like to participate in that, there's a regular crew that participates in it. But if you would like to participate in it and haven't done that so before, Jenny is the person to talk to. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, and by the way, if you have any input, if you have any ideas or suggestions, things that you'd like to do, I would certainly like to hear about it, and give me a shout. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. Okay. So the story of salmon and trout in the Great Lakes is a fascinating one. I don't know if anybody's been by the river in Port Hope, the bridge, and seen the salmon trying to get up the little slopes there. It's a fascinating story. It spans habitat degradation, overharvest, purposeful stocking, accidental introductions, naturalization, and shifting management priorities. Dr. Kathryn Peiman will focus on 6 species of salmonids tonight that utilize the tributaries of Lake Ontario during spawning and are a mix of native and non-native species. She'll delve into the history of these species, their biology and ecology, management priorities, and how these fish are an amazing success story. If we wish to have millions of people coexisting with these fish, we need healthy watersheds to support both. So Kathryn is a biologist, photographer, artist, and WBFN member. We're lucky to have her. She has studied birds and fish in many countries and has coordinated the Lake Ontario Atlantic Salmon Restoration Program. Currently, she is freelancing and has written 3 books on biology for general audiences. Her latest book is available at the back of the room. Most recently, she had a photograph receive honorable mention in the 2024 Canadian Geographic Photo Contest. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kathryn Peiman. Thank you. Okay. Hey, thank you for that introduction. It sounds like I'm going to talk about a lot of stuff, and I may or may not actually get to all of that tonight. So I spent today, like I do a lot of days at this time of the year, looking at salmon and trout coming up to spawn right now. So I was down in Bowmanville watching them there at the dam, and then I went over to Port Hope to see how many were kind of left in the river. There's a lot. It's incredible. So I'm going to talk about kind of how I came to care about these fish and what I've learned about these fish over the past several years. So my background, I am a biologist. I did my undergrad and master's at the University of Guelph. I went to UCLA to do my PhD. I did a postdoc in Australia. Then I went to Carleton University in Ottawa to do another postdoc there. And then I moved to Peterborough to coordinate the Lake Ontario Atlantic Salmon Restoration Program. When I left that job, I basically started freelancing, and I have a bunch of different contract jobs that I work right now. And during that time, I also decided to use my love of biology and my love of photography and start creating some books and do kind of a scientific outreach and communication effort for general audiences. Partly because I had been to some places that nobody gets to go to. And so one of my books is on an island in Hawaii that I got to work in one summer. And partly as well, I really wanted to show people the underwater world, because it's so easy to forget about what's underwater. And so during my career, I was lucky enough to work in a bunch of different countries. So the top left there, that's Barrow, Alaska. That's the northernmost city in the US. I worked there on a species of duck one summer. The top right, that's East Amityville Island. That's south of the Aleutian Islands. I worked there with 3 other people on seabirds one summer. Bottom left is Iceland, which is a beautiful, weird country. I worked there on fish one summer, and then the bottom right is this small island called Turn Island in the northwest Hawaiian Islands, which is about 500 miles from Honolulu in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And I'm there with a bunch of other people and hundreds of thousands of birds. In the Middle East, Puerto Rico, which is another field job. So I've been extraordinarily lucky in my biological career that I actually have gone to a bunch of places, seen a bunch of really unique ecosystems and a bunch of really cool animals. And one of my concerns is that we're losing places like this. We're losing abundance, we're losing diversity. And so I've decided to try and showcase bits of nature in the hopes that it'll help people to care about them, because most people will never get to a lot of these places that I've been lucky enough to go to. So that kind of led into why I made this book. So I live in Peterborough, and basically I was fascinated by the fact that we have all these different salmon and trout species coming up our streams. And as I learned more about them, I also realized that the history of why they're here is just kind of utterly fascinating. And so I saw this book on Vancouver's urban salmon. And I was like, that's a great idea for how to get people engaged. The fact that they're not, out in the ocean kind of far away, you're saying these are the fish in your backyard that you get to see. And so I kind of used that as an idea to do the same thing here, because we have that same thing. Again, go to Port Hope, literally downtown Port Hope, you can sit there and you can look at all these different species of salmon and trout right there in the middle of the city. And so I made this book with the idea that these are species that you can find basically in your backyard, any stream or river that's connected to Lake Ontario and has at least,
a connection that's not, blocked by a dam, you'll see, one or more of these species, coming up in the rivers. So again, fish are cool, but they're really hard to see. So the number of times I've sat by a stream with, my hands and my camera underwater, and people are like, what are you doing? Like the fish, and they're like, what fish? Like, you don't have the image of a fish in your mind, and it's just hard to see them under the water. And so again, they're easy to forget that they're there. The behavior as well, you don't get to see the behavior, even when you watch it from the surface. Seeing them like underwater in real time and like with their colors and the behavior is entirely different. So part of what I did is I filmed a lot of stuff and put them on my YouTube channel so you can actually watch the fish do what they do and not just see the still images. So watching the fish is actually a whole nother aspect to kind of appreciating them. And the third part is that, there's the idea that kind of fish are there for anglers. They are raised in hatcheries, they are put up there, and they're only put there for people to then fish them out of the water. And that's a very consumptive way of thinking about these animals, especially because a lot of them are wild. They're not from a hatchery anymore. And so I'm also trying to engage people in how we can actually appreciate the fish for kind of what they are and the ecosystem services they provide. And so we can kind of think about them and appreciate them and respect them in a different way. So the 6 species that I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to go through them one at a time. So if you go anywhere in the fall and any stream in Central Lake Ontario, you're going to see Chinook salmon. They are the most common fish. They're also really big. They're usually 70 centimeters or more when they're adults coming back. And they are usually fairly dark in color by the time they kind of get into the stream. So they are the big dark fish you see hanging about in the streams. They were first stocked over 100 years ago. It didn't work, and so it's not like we put them in 1873 and we're good to go. They tried things for a while. The streams were really bad back then. Like, they're not great now, but they were really bad back then. And so they natural reproduction didn't work. They kept stocking, and it didn't work. So they stopped for a number of years and kind of resumed in the 1960s. And so there was a gap in between, but we've been trying to have these fish in Lake Ontario for a very long time. And so, like all these other fish, they come up in the fall, they spawn, those eggs stay in the gravel over winter, they hatch out in the spring. And then these fish are one of the only ones where those juveniles head out to the lake in the same year. So they only spend a couple of months in the river before they're out of there and they go down to the lake, where they will mature and come back usually as a 2 or 3 year old adult to spawn in the river they were born in. And then like other West Coast fish, every single adult dies after it spawns. So they do not live. It is part of their life cycle. Every adult will die. So as I just said, they're West Coast fish. These fish are not native to anywhere near here. So they are a Pacific Ocean fish. And they were brought over here because we had a non-native prey fish called alewife. And so we had too many of them. They were dying in absurd numbers. They were records of kilometer-wide slits of dead fish knee deep in the lakes. And so let's say quote unquote managers, people at the time say, well, let's find something to eat them. And they threw in coho and Chinook salmon, and they did quite well, to put it mildly. So Chinook salmon are not native. However, they are completely dominated in the lake now. And they're also mainly from wild reproduction. Over half of these fish in the lake are wild, not hatchery raised. Places like the Ganaraska River are entirely wild. And last fall, they've been recording the number of these fish that come up every fall since about 2018, where they have a camera in Corbett's Dam, which you can all go online and actually see videos of the fish passing through. It's really quite cool. We had about 30,000 Chinook salmon alone, every single one wild, come through that dam. And so you can just, get your mind around how many fish, 30,000 fish looks like. It's a lot of fish. This year, we don't of course have the numbers yet, but there's a lot of fish coming back again. So it's going to be, 20,000 plus fish that will have returned this year, which is incredible. Nobody predicted it. And it was much higher previous years for, kind of the 8 to 15,000 range. And then last year, boom, 30,000 fish. Everybody's like, oh, that's a lot of fish. Steelhead are otherwise known as rainbow trout. They're also a West Coast fish, so they were also brought here. First tried to stock over 100 years ago. Didn't work, of course, but they tried again, and now they're also self-sustaining in the lake. So these guys are cool. So they do not die after they spawn, so they will survive spawning and come back several years. And they have a really diverse life history kind of set up. So these fish, some of them will actually migrate upstream in the fall, but they will all spawn in the spring. So the ones that migrate upstream in the fall and the ones that migrate up in the spring will all spawn either late winter, early spring, depending on if it's a warm or a cold year. And then they all head back out to the lake. Their juveniles stay in the stream for 1 to 3 years. Kind of depends on what the juvenile feels like. And then the adults come back at varying ages as well. And so there's actually a really diverse kind of portfolio of different life history traits in these fish, which is pretty cool. And so we call them usually rainbow trout here, even though they are migratory. Where they come from on the West Coast, the form it stays in the stream. So it's actually a form of rainbow trout that does not migrate to the ocean on the West Coast. They call those rainbow trout. The ones that migrate out to the ocean are called steelhead. And so here, it's one of those weird things. We call them rainbow trout, even though they still migrate because Lake Ontario is freshwater, it's not ocean. I mean, it's basically a freshwater ocean. So, you know, whichever you want to call them is fine. Brown trout. So these were stocked about the same time frame, late 1800s. So these guys came from Europe. And so now we've gone across the other continent to bring in a different fish species as well. And so also a non-native species. They never reached the sheer numbers of some of these other fish, but they have basically kind of tick along in the background. Also a bunch of wild reproduction going on. Ganaraska usually gets 1 to 300 of them coming back every fall. And so they're also a fall spawner. Also will survive spawning and come back in subsequent years. And they can get quite big as well. If you're ever lucky enough to look at the camera videos, I mean, some of these males, they're honkers. They are big boys coming back. And so they're a cool fish to see as well. They tried to stock sockeye salmon, another West Coast fish, in the early 1800s. Unlike the other ones I'll talk about, this one never took. So I'm putting it up here because they tried, it didn't work. So these pictures are actually from BC where you're supposed to find these fish, and you will not find them here. If you do, that's a problem. They shouldn't be here. We're not stocking them anymore. So they did try, they never worked out. So we're not going to talk about them anymore. Coho salmon is one of the big ones that they started only trying to stock in the early 1900s, and they also took off quite well. So again, another West Coast fish, like the Chinook salmon, they all die after they spawn. They tend to come back when they're around 2 to 3 years of age. Most of them coming back now seem to be about 2 years. They're a relatively fast-growing fish. And the males get these really elongated hook jaws when they kind of undergo that fining maturation for spawning. They come in purely silver and then they turn this lovely reddish color. And their juveniles, which is kind of one of the things I like about these fish, for this relatively brief period, they actually are really orange and they're quite colorful. They're kind of, like our tropical fish, but these are our baby coho salmon. And these fish will stay usually in the streams for a whole year before they go out to the lake. So they are often mixed in with the Chinook salmon. The Chinook salmon are just so big and obvious that you often mix these. If you don't know the difference between them from the top, they kind of look the same. It can be hard to kind of tell apart unless you kind of see key traits. But they're usually in the same streams as Chinook salmon are. Now we're into our native species. So we have our 4 non-natives. We have our Chinook, coho, and steelhead, all from the West Coast, and our brown trout from Europe. All in Lake Ontario, all wild reproducing, all doing quite well. Our native Atlantic salmon is not doing so well. So we actually lost this fish completely. It was only native to Lake Ontario. So Niagara Falls, it's a really great barrier to fish. They cannot jump that. So historically, Atlantic salmon did come in from the Atlantic Ocean and they colonized Lake Ontario. And even though we don't have really good numbers for how many fish, how many Atlantic salmon there were, we have, records that we can estimate that even in one river, like the Credit River, it probably had 100,000 Atlantic salmon return to spawn every year. And so you can imagine how many were in the entire lake. And so like ground trout, they don't die after reproducing, and so they have these, you know, life cycles where they can, the adults can live multiple years. But we did lose them through deforestation, through damming our rivers, through overharvest, and so the last ones were caught in the late 1800s. So I did work with the Atlantic Salmon Restoration Program, whose goal was to bring back this fish into this new ecosystem. So Lake Ontario is different than it used to be. We have a lot of other fish. We have a lot of different prey in the lake. We have a lot of chemical and food web changes in the lake. I believe this fish can make it. Unfortunately, right now, it's not doing so well. Our stocking programs, and we do have to stock this fish because they are not well reproducing. We just don't have a lot coming back yet. I shouldn't say the program doesn't have a lot coming back from everything I've heard. So I hope we bring this fish back. It used to be here. It should be here. We know why we lost it. And so it is, you know, it's deserving to be back in our Lake Ontario ecosystem. And so the attempts are being made. And so sometimes you will also see these fish. So the bottom right one there, that's a picture I took of one jumping at the Bowmanville Dam. And so they are around. If you look really hard, I saw one in Port Hope today. So they are in the mix. And then our other native species, and this is the only one that did not go to the lake, is the brook trout. And so it's in a different genus than the other fish. And unfortunately, it's not doing well either. And so from what we can gather, it's probably declined about 80%. They're really restricted now to the headwaters. They don't like warm water, and we've done a great job warming up our streams. As the further down they get, and you lose that kind of groundwater input. And so these fish aren't doing so well anymore. They really restricted their range. It's possible they used to swim to Lake Ontario, Lake Superior. We know that those brook trout do actually sometimes go to the lake and mature in the lake and then come back to the streams to spawn. It's possible we also had that in Ontario, but we don't know. And if we did, we certainly really kind of don't have them anymore. I said it's a new lake, and so there's a lot of work trying to preserve the remaining brook trout that we still have left. So how do these 6 species fit into Lake Ontario? So there are fish community objectives agreed on by the 2 nations that, you know, jointly manage Lake Ontario. And the main goal of these fish community objectives is that they want to support basically trophy-sized Chinook salmon for people to catch. Chinook salmon eat alewife. Alewife are also a non-native prey species. The problem with alewife is they have an enzyme that breaks down vitamin B1 called thiamine. And so anything that eats these alewives tends to be thiamine deficient. So it's lacking an essential vitamin. It's been broken down, and that leads to things like death, which tends to be bad in fish. I don't know. And so the problem is that initially these fish were introduced to control the alewife. Now they want to keep the alewife because there's this huge recreational fishery for the Chinook salmon. And it's so big that literally the goal for this entire Great Lake is to say we want big Chinook salmon for people to catch. And so one argument I'm going to make is that maybe that's not a goal worthy of a Great Lake. It does hurt native species. So, you know, they're not stalking alewife, but they're saying we only want to put in so many other fish because we want to keep a certain number of alewife around. Other fish eat the alewife and they don't do so well. So both the adults can die and then offspring, because they of course get their nutrients from their mother. They tend to die as well. So those very, very young fish also die. And so it hurts natural recruitment of these other fish, other native species that we want to keep around. So it's not exactly a great thing for the ecosystem as a whole. The other really cool thing is that, of course, all these non-native fish were put in the lake by stocking. I mean, there's no other way to get them there. And a lot of the stocking started, you know, kind of the 1960s, it really kind of picked up. By the 1990s, already there was a lot of wild reproduction. Now we know the lake, at least for Chinook salmon, is dominated by wild reproduction. There's actually not great assessments for some of the other species. Coho is a pretty good assessment. It's also close to 50% at least. Steelhead and brown trout, again, there's actually no lake-wide data on them, but there's plenty of streams that have entirely wild, non-stocked, self-sustaining steelhead and brown trout runs as well. So here's this cool thing, wild fish are free. If you're stocking fish, you're paying people to go out, collect the adults, strip out those eggs, care for those babies for sometimes months, sometimes a year, in a hatchery, drive out to all these places and release the fish. So it's a lot of time and energy that goes into stocking a fish. You don't need any of that for a wild fish. It just does what it does. So it's free. Wild fish are also more resilient, so they can evolve to actually do things like tolerate this deficiency in vitamin B1. And so the Chinook salmon, even though they only eat alewife, they have evolved to be able to deal with it. So we actually don't need the support of a hatchery to say that, oh, well, they can't reproduce. They can reproduce, and they are reproducing on their own. And so there's a whole bunch of ways they evolve to actually fit that ecosystem better than if we are trying to put fish in from a hatchery instead. The other part of it is the human connection. So the idea that, again, Lake Ontario is managed for anglers, they're only one set of the community of people that live around these Great Lakes. If you tell people that this fish was raised by people and put in a lake for you to catch, they often view it differently than if you say this fish is a wild fish, part of the ecosystem where its parents had to swim upstream and find a mate and lay eggs, and the eggs survived and the baby survived to bring this fish back to you. So you can often value it differently and as a wild fish than you do if you say this is a put, grow, take fishery, these fish are here for your pleasure, as opposed to these are wild fish. Let's maybe respect the fact that they are fish doing their thing. They are not just for you to, you know, you can fish with them, of course, but that is not the only way to kind of enjoy and appreciate these fish. Let's respect them more. And so the messaging about how these fish get there actually affects how people think about them and how people treat the fish. So because it's awkward for me to switch two videos on here, I'm going to go through them all and maybe play some videos at the end instead of switching in the middle of the presentation. Here's the other fun thing. So again, managing Lake Ontario for Chinook salmon, you basically shouldn't eat Chinook salmon. So there are guidelines on how many fish you can eat based on all these different contaminants that are measured in the fish. So for Chinook salmon, PCBs, which are bad, there's enough in Chinook salmon that basically any woman who is thinking about becoming pregnant and any child under 15 should never eat an adult Chinook. An adult man can eat one Chinook every 10 months. So basically the calculations, so there's a page of calculations and you say, okay, how big is your fish? Where did I catch it? And therefore, how much can it eat? And so they say, okay, basically for an adult Chinook, you can eat one meal a month, but a Chinook gives you 10 meals. And so one fish feeds a man based on the fish consumption guidelines for 10 months. And so the limit under a sport license, though, is that you can keep 5 fish. And so this is true of all the fish. The limits for angling don't reflect the safe consumption guidelines, which is an interesting thing, again, considering that the goal of Lake Ontario is to manage the people to be able to catch the fish. And I mean, maybe just catch and release as opposed to consumption, but, you know, people do both. And so the problem is these fish are actually not, you know, safe to eat from that perspective. And we don't even really know what the other chemicals are in these fish. So if you've heard of PFAS, the forever chemicals, there's new research looking at how many of those are in the fish. Chinook basically fail the safe consumption limits for that chemical as well, for these new studies looking at that. So there's a suggestion perhaps that, again, this is not the best way to manage a lake when you can't even eat the main fish that you're trying to kind of manage for. And again, it's like it's cool, right? So I'm not putting down Chinook or any of these other fish. Yes, they're non-native, but they're filling a niche that was left bare when we lost our Atlantic salmon. We lost lake trout from the lake. We lost, you know, a bunch of other fish, and these current fish communities are now replacing those. And so the fact that these fish have evolved in a whole bunch of different ways. So these fish all came from populations where they would migrate out to the ocean as adults. Lake Ontario ain't an ocean, it's not saltwater, it's freshwater. So these fish have evolved for an entirely freshwater life cycle. That's pretty darn cool. Most fish can't do that, but all of these fish have successfully evolved to complete their whole life cycle in freshwater. We have these new species interactions. We have West Coast species from a native Great Lake species to European species, all in the same streams interacting. And this is an entirely new, set of circumstances that the fish have to basically deal with. We have new food. So we've had introductions of prey fish from different parts of the world through various mechanisms that now form the basis of the food web that these fish have also never seen before. And so there's a whole new food web that we have in the lake as well. And if you've ever, seen the beautiful pictures of fish like in BC and their beautiful clear streams, where you can see like 10 kilometers and everything's just like pretty perfect with big gravel. If you've ever looked at any of our streams, we don't have that. We have sand, we have sediment, we have a fish spawning, and when it digs that red where it's gonna lay its eggs, a big plume, it just like turns the water brown kind of thing. I mean, yet again, they're making it work. And so it's actually a really cool success story where nobody really thought this was possible, and yet they're doing it. If you take somebody from BC and you say, can a fish live here? They'll be like, no, that's garbage. And yet they're doing it. It's amazing. So again, thinking about, what we have in Lake Ontario, there's 5 priorities. And I say that Chinook salmon are failing 3 of those 5. So they're not wholesome food. Fish consumption guidelines say they're actually not safe to eat for most of us. There's no cultural heritage. The fish have only been in our lakes for, a few decades. It's not supporting a healthy environment because their prey hurts other native fish. The 4th and 5th requirement are recreation and employment. It's like, well, yes, they do that, but so would having an actual ecosystem where we have native species in a balance, doing their own thing, not micromanaged by managers who say we need to stop X number of fish to reach this target. And we know exactly how everything works because we have our stock recruitment models and basically let the Great Lake be a Great Lake in capitals. And so again, it's not just, me being like, oh, this is a really cool Great Lake. There are so many people that get to enjoy these fish. Why is this Great Lake managed for anglers? It just kind of baffles the mind. It's been this way for 25 years. That wording hasn't changed, that they're going to manage Lake Ontario so that people can catch trophy-sized Chinook salmon. And so I think that's, a very narrow way to kind of value, again, a Great Lake, and that maybe we can change our valuation of this from something that supports a small subset of society to one that actually supports the ecosystem and lets everybody basically kind of enjoy this, this lake. Yeah, just so that. So that's kind of my motivation for this book. And so instead of the whole technical paper, which is another aspect of what I'm doing for the science side of it, I decided to take little bits of that I just talked about and combine them with pictures and basically have, 1 to 3 sentences for each picture and say, look at these pretty pictures and let people engage that way. Because again, unless you spend a lot of time in these streams, you're not going to see all these species. You're not going to see them do various things. You're not going to see the juveniles, which aren't hard to see, but you have to kind of know what to look for. And having an underwater camera really helps, and most people aren't going to do that. And so I wanted to basically show the people what you have basically in your backyard, or at least somewhere relatively close. I mean, if you're in Toronto, there's a bunch of streams you can go to where you can see these fish. And, again, there's a lot of people in Southern Ontario. It's 1/3 of Canada's population. It's a lot of people, and we need the best streams to support the fish, everything else, and everything we do to support the fish, we support the people, because that is part of that healthy stream ecosystem. So the other thing I did was basically try and show my videos, because again, a static picture is great, but a moving picture video is even better. And so I posted all my videos. My handle is Nature Tidbits. And so it's not just fish. I film a lot of different stuff. And so but I've done a lot of basically underwater footage of the fish doing their thing. And so that is something that anybody can check out if you want to actually see. Again, I'm going to show you a little bit at the end here, but another place to kind of see these fish doing their thing. And Instagram as well, so it's mainly pictures. And so these are my most recent ones, which all happen to be basically Chinook salmon Ganaraski River, in Port Hope. But that is, another thing that I share because, again, it's a way for me to talk about the biology of the fish. And then for those that don't have the opportunity to go down and see the fish, they get to basically see it by proxy. The other two things that I did was I wanted to kind of share other aspects of my biological background. So when I talked about other places I've kind of been in the world, the most special place I got to go to was this place called Tern Island. So it is about 500 miles northwest of Honolulu. It is basically a dot in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. I got to go there for a summer and work on seabirds. And it's a research station that's no longer active. It was damaged in a tsunami and they didn't reopen it. But it was a long-term research station that was modified during the Second World War so the planes could land there. And so it's this really weird kind of mix with, kind of human attributes to it, like the runway and there's lead paint in the soil and garbage and stuff like that, but also tens of thousands of seabirds breeding there. And so I wanted to describe what it was like for those that maybe wanted to consider being a biologist. So it is meant for the general audience, but also, again, I felt I was so privileged to be there. So few people will get to ever see both the diversity and just the sheer number of birds that were there, that I wanted to share that. The fact that I got to go there, I felt like I had to share it with other people, otherwise it would be lost. It's like an opportunity that I got to describe what it was like to be in this place and share all this, both biological information, but then again, like weaving in that personal narrative, the bigger human dimensions, when we do our trash walks around the island, what we pick up every week that's washed from, either Japan or from North America. It's just, we're all connected, right? So even a remote island in the middle of nowhere is not above all these, plastic pollution and all that stuff. The other one I did is a much simpler book. Basically, it's for a very young audience, and it's really some examples of what you can find in your stream. So just encouraging, young people maybe to go out and, giving some examples of, the invertebrates, the fish, the turtles that you can find in your stream. And so that was just more of a exploration about, other ways to kind of read people. So both this book and the Do You Want to Be a Biologist book, which again, it's like I imagine it as maybe teenagers thinking about what they want to do in life. I thought I wanted to be a vet. I didn't really know what it was like to be a biologist. And so looking back, I'm like, to me, having this book at that time in my life would have probably really turned me towards being more of a biologist immediately than having to be like, do you want to be a vet? Not so much. And so those are both available on Amazon, whereas my Salmon and Trout book is available at the back because it was easier to bring a bunch here than if anybody was interested to order it otherwise. And so with that, we have to see videos. So these might be, okay, so it's going to be a little choppy. Unfortunately, the Wi-Fi doesn't like streaming really well, but this is just an example of one of the videos that I put up on my YouTube. So basically for underwater filming, I got a bunch of GoPros and I secured them to various things and I put them in the stream and I walk away for an hour and I come back and I see what I have. And sometimes I have gravel because the fish has knocked it down, which is always super annoying, or I have the sky because the fish has knocked it facing upwards. But other times I get really cool behavior. And so I was lucky to discover this, relatively small stream, and the brook trout were quite active and really cool to watch them again do their thing. And so you see here, this is a female. There she is digging her red. So where our fish lays eggs, the salmon lay eggs, the female digs it out with her tail. It's called a red, REDD. And so she basically is moving away some of that sediment from a rocky area, and she will use her anal fin and she will be putting that into the rocks to test the depth of it. And when she's satisfied, the dominant male who's guarding her and chasing away all the other fish that want to be a part of this, he will come up and he will release the sperm, and then all the other males that are waiting in the side, they will try their shot as well. And so sometimes you can have, 5 or more males darting in the last second to also, have a little bit of fertilization going on there, which is, again, just really cool to watch. And so a lot of these fish, the male will actually vibrate and rub up against the female as a way to kind of motivate her to get a move on. It's like, I'm ready to go. Aren't you ready to go yet? Come on. And so this one just has a whole bunch basically of fish doing their fish things. It's pretty cool as well when you see them fight. I've seen the males grab the fin of another male and just like drag them out of there and be like, you are done, buddy. So the males do a whole bunch of work. Again, at least in this stream, because there are so many other males that didn't get a chance to have a girl, and so they are all just waiting, and he is constantly chasing them all away. And this is one of those accidents where they hit my camera facing up, but it was kind of cool because then you can just see the forest around them and the fish kind of doing their thing above the camera. So this was last year when there was, 30,000 Chinook that went through the Ganaraska. So this is downtown Port Hope. So if you haven't been there, then Port Hope's quite amazing because the river runs straight through town. And so these fish are just so easy to see. Last year, of course, there were anglers. As you may know, they made it a sanctuary this year. So there are no anglers down there catching the fish, which is a whole other discussion if you want to have it. But the problem is that Port Hope is relatively unique because the town blasted the river down to make it lower after the town flooded. But that left these series of shallow pools in the bedrock and these little stone lifts. And so the fish gather in the slightly deeper areas because it takes energy to make these little jumps. And so they wait for the right conditions. And so you have these buildup of fish in these pools. And when you have, hundreds of fish in a pool, I mean, fishing for them, it's kind of, it's easy in a bad way for people that basically catch the fish. And so it created a lot of problems. And that's because of how basically the river is now. So this is the same idea. This is just from the side again. It's really hard to capture not that 30,000 fish came in all at once, but just to have a river chock full of fish. And we used to have this river Atlantic salmon. We just, changed our lakes so much that now we have a different species dominating the rivers each fall. And we don't see a lot about juvenile fish. And so this was in Covert Creek. And so these are all baby rainbow trout. And so these are individuals that are, mainly 1 year old, there might be some 2-year-olds in there. And so they're, wild fish. Everyone, Covert's a wild run river as well. And so all those babies are wild fish and they're all doing their things. I like this because in the background, you can see this is in the fall because they're dead Chinook salmon. And so again, like the carcasses provide nutrients. So if you're in, the West Coast, you think about the tiny fish going out in the fall. And then you have the big adults coming back, and 99% of the body weight came from the ocean. And so they're bringing basically the ocean nutrients into the streams. They're doing the same thing here. They're bringing the lake nutrients into the streams. It's more extreme in the West Coast, where they have done a whole bunch of research. And of course, those carcasses feed the bald eagles and the grizzly bears and the wolves, and they feed the forest, right? So they've done the experiments that show how much everything grows because of the salmon carcasses. It's a different situation here. We're not so nutrient limited, but they're doing the same thing. So those carcasses, those fish coming up and dying, those are making the phytoplankton, which is feeding the invertebrates, which is food for the baby fish kind of thing. And they've done the same thing looking at other fish. So white suckers, which spawn in the spring, rivers that have white suckers coming up and releasing all those eggs. Those are providing nutrients, and those streams are way more productive than streams that don't have white suckers coming in. So we've lost a lot of these connections because we also have a lot of dams now, and so fish can't actually make it upstream. But that was historically an important source of nutrients coming from the lake up into our streams. And this is just basically, this is Wilmot. If you've never been to the Orono Crown Lands, it's public access. It's a fantastic place to go hiking. You can walk right along Wilmot Creek. And Wilmot tends to have a lot of coho salmon, unlike the Ganaraska, which tends to have a lot of Chinook salmon. And so there's a few, deeper pools there. I use my drone sometimes. And if you walk along the stream in the fall, you're going to see a bunch of these fish doing their thing as well. And so Again, you're lucky because you have these streams in your backyard. You know, I call these kind of urban fish, even though, you know, some are more urban than others, but they are all easily accessible and easily watchable. And so these are a bunch of Chinook salmon from above fighting. There's like one female here and like 6 males, and so when you have that big surprise, the males fight. Here the males fighting again, and look at like the water quality, right? I mean, it's so grainy, it's so full of sediment. And so, you know, a fish biologist from somewhere else would be like, they can't survive in that. There's like oxygen deprived, and sediment's gonna smother all the eggs and the babies, and there's gonna be no food. Nope. They have it all figured out. Yeah, as a random Chinook in there, you can tell the very spotted tail. And so I'm trying to find the digging. There, so this is a female and a male coho. Come back here. Right there. So watch the female when she uses her tail to dig. So there's the male quivering, saying, come on, come on. She's gonna dig. Look at all that sediment that she just moved. And so this is another thing that we lost when we lost our Atlantic salmon and other fish that would come up and spawn. By the actual act of making these reds and spawning, they moved sediment downstream and into the lake. So they actually cleaned what was in the streams every single year by doing this. And so this is another thing these fish are now replacing, replicating. It's actually changing in a good way how sediments move downstreams. When they dig up those rocks, you actually get more air spaces, you actually get more water going through and cooling down, you actually get more spots for invertebrates. And so there's actually this whole really complex thing that, again, these fish are helping us with because we lost what we used to have. And so there's a whole bunch more fish stuff. Anyway, I'm gonna let that keep running, and I will happily take any actual questions now.
Right, in Lake Ontario. Last time we had a speaker here a few years back on salmon. Said they were taking care of the lamprey. I was out a few weeks ago, and almost all the salmon have marks on lamprey. One rainbow had a fresh one that just knocked off landing. And also we had a brown trout. And as you know, in Lake Ontario, they're silver, right? However, this one was river colored, so it just come out of the river. You know, the lake. Can you give me a little story on you guys you're not doing very good with the lamprey.
So yeah, so the question is basically about the sea lamprey, which is likely an invasive species. There is some hints that it is native to Lake Ontario, but at the very least, it is more abundant than it used to be, and it was not native to the other 4 Great Lakes. So because we connected all the Great Lakes canals, we allowed invasive species to basically come and colonize all the lakes. So sea lamprey spend up to 7 years in a stream as filter feeding little guys. They just live in the sediment. They just filter what's in the water column. No issues. Then they mature. They head out to the lake and they spend about 1.5 years in the lake, where they are parasites, and they basically like salmon and trout, and they will attach to the fish, and they use their teeth to rasp through the scales, and they eat the blood of the fish. And so, of course, that will kill the fish in some cases. In other cases, the fish survive. So when you see fish come back with usually big round marks on them, that's from a lamprey that just lodged at some point in the past or recently. Kind of hard to tell. So that fish actually did survive that parasitism attack, which is kind of cool. So, you know, if you see fish with that on them, they actually didn't die. They live, which is, you know, pretty remarkable. During COVID, so what they do for sea lamprey, they do one of 2 things. We have a bunch of barriers that they maintain for sea lamprey. So sea lamprey need to spawn in the streams, just like salmon and trout do, but sea lamprey can't jump. So basically, they use the barriers as a way to prevent the sea lamprey from making it upstream to spawn. So they reduce numbers by limiting spawning opportunities. They also have a chemical, that's relatively specific to lampreys. They, basically, put in streams where they can't block them from coming up. The lampricide does kill a few non-target species, unfortunately, but that is the strategy that we use. Basically, people use to control the sea lamprey. During COVID, where travel was restricted, they were not able to treat a lot of streams with this lampricide. So the idea is that because of that, a lot more lampreys went into Lake Ontario and matured in the last couple of years. However, that happened at the same time where we had the largest run ever of Chinook salmon come back into the Ganaraska, and that was actually a pattern across a lot of trips, is that a lot of fish came back last year and again this year, which is again at the exact same time where we supposedly have this huge abundance of lamprey in the lake. So one of the problems is, and there's papers on this, the numbers of fish and the numbers of lamprey marks, which is how they basically measure how many lampreys are in the lake, is actually not correlated. And so you can say, okay, we have a bunch of more sea lamprey this year, but if we also have this huge number of fish coming back, what does that mean for the actual dynamic in the lake? And so that's kind of the only answer I can give. I'm not a sea lamprey researcher. I only know little bits that I read here and there, but it is interesting that the years where they say they had the most sea lamprey in the lake because they were not able to treat during COVID are also the years where we actually had the highest number of Chinook salmon return, and sea lamprey love Chinook salmon. So that's all I can really say about that.
Yeah, this is a great presentation. This kind of is a comment that's probably close to home for you, but another connection to fishery the objectives that are based on really the anglers targeting in Ontario. And it's a very powerful lobby that make sure that that is intact. And it even spilled over. You see this. I find it curious to see the relationship they're trying to maintain between non-native species, white salmon, and trying to make sure that that is all their models is where they want to have it. But it spilled over into the bird community. Like very earlier, Richard was talking about the cormorant time. That's all based on this misguided and totally unjustified simplification of the cormorants as being competition for resources for salmon. And so it's it's just seems the whole management scheme is based only not on maintaining a natural ecosystem. It's all based on, and the truth is that cormorants are a native species. So here we are, we did not even get the guys to really stop and know genetics quite well. So it's kind of a common connected see that's kind of striking these very curious.
Yeah, I think so sorry for those on Zoom, the comment was basically about how we are managing certain things, and that includes the fish in the lake, that includes cormorants for kind of a subset of people and for very anthropomorphic desires that may not be the same as kind of ecosystem processes. And I agree with that. I have tried to keep up to date on the science of some of these things. There is very little science. Okay, I'll say no science to show that cormorants are having an effect on something as big as Lake Ontario. Again, if we say the cormorants are at their peak number now, how did we get so many Chinook salmon coming back, kind of thing. So there's a whole bunch of complex things. My take is that we have MNRF, we have Lake Ontario Management Unit, we have people whose job it is to basically manage our systems for what we want them to be. We often are failing in doing that, and so there's a different philosophy that I tend to agree with, which is maybe we should let the system kind of do what it does, because we spend a lot of money and a lot of time trying to control, manage, eliminate a whole bunch of things that we have deemed to be either they shouldn't be here or they are at too high numbers, or in some cases too low numbers, and so we're trying to support them. And not to say that that all is bad, but at the same time, how well are we really doing it? Like, we honestly don't know. And I worry when I see things. I remember the original FNR posting about cormorants, and there was no science about why we should be having a cormorant hunting season. It was that people complained about too many cormorants. So I worry about the government, who sometimes seems to take special interest groups more seriously than kind of, getting science-based management and bigger ecosystem community objectives, that things aren't stable in the real world. There's an ebb and flow, there is a rise and fall, there are good years, there are bad years. There are 30,000 Chinook salmon years, there are 5,000 Chinook salmon years, and that's actually part of the ecosystem. And as humans, we like to have things stable, and that just doesn't work. And so, yeah, I could keep going on, but I'll probably stop there. It's basically, it's a different philosophy that managers have, and I guess they have to. That's their job, right? Is to basically manage things. But at the same time, if we didn't do that, would things actually be worse off? We usually don't try the other scenario.
You mentioned that Chinook salmon are not edible for most people. What about coho salmon?
That's a great question. So I really focused on Chinook salmon when I was reviewing the fish consumption guidelines. I can't remember off the top of my head for the other. Is it the same?
It's the same.
It's the same? It could be. So I mean, like most animals, the ones that get bigger tend to have a higher accumulation of stuff in them. Chinook do get bigger than coho, and so that was one of the reasons I wasn't sure if the smaller size of the coho might make them a little more okay. But yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it might be the same then.
Okay, but the cormorants, okay, ministry has now changed their method of dropping their fish into the lake, okay, the young. Tonight, the predation by the cormorants was so bad. They know the cormorants are waiting where they don't. Cormorants are waiting for them. They know what time of year they're there. They wipe every one of those hatchery fish. So it's now changed to nighttime.
So the comment was about M&R changing their stocking strategy to nighttime because the cormorants, being smart birds, have learned that, we were basically saying, here's a buffet of dumb fish from the hatchery that don't know what a predator is and hasn't had to worry about anything because they just got food dropped in on them. So not denying that cormorants don't eat the fish that we put out, they eat our sport fish, but all the diet studies show that they eat other things more. And one of the things that it's easy to forget when you look at numbers, cormorants eat a lot of fish. Humans also eat a lot of fish, and there is so many fish in the lake as well. And so again, just thinking about the sheer, it's so hard to imagine the sheer biomass out there, right? And so, okay, if lampreys took out 10 million fish, well, humans took out 40 million fish, and we still have a functioning ecosystem. So how many fish are out there? And so, again, if the cormorants are so abundant now, and we still have high numbers of fish, then what are we really doing? And again, if they're like, well, you put out these hatchery fish, you're going to eat them, maybe the answer is we shouldn't be putting out hatchery fish. We should be encouraging wild reproduction by doing things like protecting habitat, restoring habitat, and putting our money efforts towards those types of things that help, again, all the parts of the ecosystem, as opposed to the angler that wants to fish for that fish you just put in.
To that comment, I think there's a very simplistic view that still persists in ecology that cormorants eat fish, therefore cormorants are taking fish away from us. We need to reduce the number of cormorants. And it's a very simplistic view that is applied to ecology. It's totally misguided. It needs to, and you look at some of the research on cormorants shows that in fact, a healthy cormorant population benefits the fishery and the health of the fishery, takes out some species that are invasive and others. So this whole thing that, we can't share its resources with any other species on this lake, and you said there's lots of fish there. It's gotta change. And, cormorants are here before the Europeans survived, the lake is doing fine. So it's totally a philosophical and moral thing here that we gotta learn that we have to have, we have to be able to learn how to share and not say cormorants can't have anything to shoot every cormorant on the site. Some of these cormorant hunts are brutal. They wound the birds, it's hit the traps, and the fact that they have allowed this under legislation that is not even written for that purpose, because you don't eat cormorants. It's again, it's totally off base. So.
I proposed a very simple answer to this terrible problem about 3 or 4 years ago when we all asked our opinion on the cormorant hunt. I said that I backed the cormorant hunt and the bag limit of 50 birds, providing it's exactly the same as with all the ducks, because one of the conditions of the North American hunting rules is you have to eat your prey. And I said, I back the cormorant hunt so long as every hunter eats the whole 50 cormorants. They didn't take my advice.
Yeah, so the comment was about the fact that when you shoot a cormorant, unlike pretty much anything under the Fish and Wildlife Act, you do not have to consume the cormorant. Which is why, of course, people have realized that basically the government has made hunters perform a cull for them, because it is no longer hunting, which requires you to eat what you're taking. Just like fish, you can't kill a fish and then let it go to waste. That's illegal. You have to, if you're catching the fish and killing it, you have to eat it. But cormorants, they changed the rules and they said you do not have to eat the cormorants, which means it's not a hunted, so it's a cull.
Fish in northern lakes in Ontario, called speckled trout, and lake trout, are they same as some, is that the same as the brook trout?
So the speckled trout is another name for the brook trout. So that is the same species. A lake trout is definitely a different species. We have them in Lake Ontario. They spawn in the lake. They don't use the rivers to spawn, which is why I didn't include them, because they are not a fish you are going to see come upstream. You'll only see them if you're out in a deep water system.
Yes.
Lake trout is one of the native species in Lake Ontario that is doing very, very, very poorly. And so there's a lot of efforts trying to restore that species. They have been decimated, yeah. An excellent question. I don't know directly, because they have contaminants like all the other fish do, to varying degrees. I believe there was a study showing that because these fish are swimming upstream and dying, they are bringing those contaminants into the system. I do not know though what effect those have if they stay in the system versus they go back out to the lake kind of thing. And so I don't know the food web implications for things that then consume either Chinook salmon or things that are in the streams that Chinook salmon are in. Guessing pretty much everything everywhere is contaminated to some degree, so I don't know the answer where that where they fit in kind of bringing that to a better or worse conclusion.
Great. That was fascinating. Thank you so much. So we have a gift here for you. extremely fascinating to learn so much about salmon and to know that we could just go outside and see them so close by to the urban center. So thank you so much, Kathryn. That was wonderful. All right, before I go into the last items on this slide, I just want to throw it out there. So this is a club run by volunteers, so it's supported by volunteers. And there's always room for more volunteers. So if you enjoy the programs, if you enjoy the speakers, if you enjoy the outings, help us continue to provide those outings and speakers and activities that you enjoy. So to become a member of a committee or volunteer on a committee, we have a speakers committee who plan these speakers. We have outings committees that work on the outings. We have the nominations committee that help deliver the board members. We have an education committee that works with the scholarships and getting information out to the schools about the scholarships and so on. So there's lots of ways to participate. Some of it is not super time consuming. Some of it can be time consuming depending on how much you want to get involved. So please consider the volunteer opportunities that exist within our club. All right, so next meeting, I want to draw your attention to the date, October 18th. It is not the last Friday of the month. The library has an activity here on that day. Normally we would be on the 25th. We are on the 18th next month. The topic is Don McLeod, who's the club member. He's going to be talking about bird tracks and sign. And don't send me a bunch of emails telling me there's a typo on that slide. Sign is what it is supposed to say. Sign can be singular or plural in this context. So bird tracks and sign. The next outing's coming up, so watch your emails. There will be an on the fly, that's what OTF stands for, on the fly hawk watch. On the fly is something that we only give you really short notice on, because especially for raptor migration or even other types of bird migration, we have to check the wind forecast, we have to check the weather forecast, and we need to try to get it right to maximize that morning or that afternoon or whatever it is. So with the raptor migration happening now, Chris will be calling it close to probably within 2 days before we're actually going to have the outing. So you'll get an email and you'll get about 2 days notice about an upcoming date. So that is going to be happening in the next couple of weeks if we can find a good weather day. And on October 20th, we are going to be going to the Kirtland Warbler habitat. Now, if you were here in January, Ben Walters was here speaking to us about the Kirtland Warblers and describing the project that he's working on near the Ganarask Forest to reestablish this habitat for the birds. So this is a exclusive opportunity to go to this thing. This is not open to the public. This is for our club. And Ben will be showing us around and explaining to us the work that they're doing. We'll also be looking at other species that might be passing through at this time of year. So that should be a good morning, weather permitting. So you'll be getting a notification with all the details about that around the October 12th. And again, one friendly reminder, it's time to consider renewing your membership. So if you feel like it, Chris is at the back and can take your membership renewal now or go online or at the next meeting. So that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for coming. See you on October 18th.